appreciate your external echoes, because this is something that will bring us as a consortium forward. Before you will learn more about IDERHA with the next talks, I will start setting the scene. There are a lot of paradigm shifts in lung cancer, be it early detection, be it management of the early stages of lung cancer, or be it follow-up. And so for us as clinicians, exciting times for the patients, and they are really at the top of interest. It's very promising times, because we are now about to significantly improve the prognosis and outcomes within lung cancer. When I started 20 years ago, lung cancer was common, increasing. It was unfortunately a very deadly disease, and it's still a very expensive disease. And let's not forget about the patients. For our patients with lung cancer, there is a high physical but also psychological burden, and there are also impacts on their social and even spiritual life. And it's not only the patients, but it's also the relatives, and it's also us, the caretakers, that suffer from this so far deadly disease of lung cancer. But the present and the future, as said, for us as clinicians, exciting; for the patients, hopefully very promising, because there are a lot of developments going on in lung cancer throughout the entire lung cancer pathway. Early detection, diagnostics, the different modalities of therapy, but also follow-up is currently, let's say, somehow revolutionized. And the question is, do these really promising developments also translate into better outcomes, including better satisfaction for our patients? Let's start with early detection, namely lung cancer screening with annual low-dose CT scans. There has been the Nelson trial that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine that showed for the first time on the European soil a benefit in terms of lung cancer mortality reduction in an screening cohort compared to a control group without screening. And this was due to a stage shift from the really malignant late advanced stages towards the curable early stages. So we are now about to implement lung cancer screening programs within the European Union. And the question, although the evidence is solid and should not be debated, the question still is, like in any other program, how to improve the benefits and harms in lung cancer screening. And one idea is to come up with predictive biomarkers with risk models, for example, to better compose your cohorts, your people at high risk for lung cancer, to make lung cancer screening more effective. And this will be one idea that within IDERHA we would like to focus on. Also, if screening detects pulmonary nodules, if they are indeterminate or positive, we would like to see better predictive biomarkers, diagnostic biomarkers that could help us to really detect those with lung cancer and to ideally rule out everybody that does not have a malignant nodule, to really keep the numbers of futile invasive procedures low. Within our, let's say, clinical community, we are in parallel running an EU for Health funded consortium, SOLACE, that will help to facilitate the implementation of lung cancer screening programs in In Europe, you can see that there are a lot of the needed European medical societies are involved, as there is patient representation. And we have also very powerful database, especially imaging data sets from the past. And we are currently working on collaborations with IDERHA as well. We have just recently, end of last year, with Insolis performed the first snapshot and how the landscape in terms of lung cancer screening implementation looks like in Europe. And there are 3 ongoing national programs already. The first in Croatia, Czech and Poland have followed. There are the countries with green and white stripes like Germany, that have now started thinking or working actively on implementation of national lung cancer screening program, but there are also countries in red on the map that haven't started with these initiatives yet. And one idea of IDERHA could be, and hopefully will be, that we can provide platform solutions and AI capacities in different settings in this very heterogeneous European healthcare environment to set up or help to set up lung cancer screening programs. This could be on the local level, and we are trying to include local implementation study in lung cancer screening here in Berlin and a site in Bonn, but this could also be on the more global European level, also taking into account a clinical research platform via the European Respiratory Society, the CSC perspective. If we move on from early detection to diagnostics, there's also a lot going on. Personal diagnostics in lung cancer across all stages is now taking place. Here you can see some of our own local data. NGS testing is currently well established in the advanced metastasized stages. We are already doing this since 2017, also in the early lung cancer stages. So these are valuable data that could also help us with an IDERHA to come up with predictive and also prognostic models taking into account AI solution. And the question will be how to integrate these more and more complex diagnostic parameters into algorithms, because we are currently not only speaking about single mutations, but we are talking about co-mutations or even a set of genetic alterations. And at least for me, it's becoming so complex that my, let's say, clinical mind can hardly grasp these pieces of information. For that, we do need platform solutions. For that, we do need powerful AI solutions. And this is also something that IDERHA will stand for. If we speak of therapies, especially nowadays in lung cancer, non-small cell lung cancer, the management of the early stage non-small cell lung cancer treatment pathways are currently redefined. So here you can see the time stream starting from the 2000s with the introduction of adjuvant chemotherapies after curative surgeries, leading to a survival benefit. Nowadays, we are speaking about adjuvant, neoadjuvant introduction of immunotherapies, also in combination with chemotherapies, or even perioperative introduction of immunotherapies and chemotherapies, leading to additional overall survival benefits. And the question here will be for us as clinicians, how can we map these complex pathways? How can we describe shifts over times in terms of treatment modalities? How can we prove that the evidence is really put into clinical routine? So pathway mapping will be something that I think IDERHA, with this powerful platforms and IT solutions, that we will come up and can support. Also, I think everybody is aware that there's also a chance to create valid control arms based on real-world evidence data. Also, in silico data are a topic of high interest nowadays. This is also something that we within IDERHA will try to focus on, or at least provide the technical solutions to help researchers as well as healthcare providers to use the data and analyze the data that are out there. Final point, follow-up. There's a very nice work from a French group, from Denise and colleagues, that has been first presented at ASCO in 2015, then published 2017. This was a very innovative design at those days, where they compared classical follow-up in lung cancer treatment with these every 3 months CT scan follow-up, compared to an app solution that was handed out to the patients, where they could describe symptoms on a weekly basis. These data were automatically transferred to a central unit, automatically analyzed, and there were some kind of warning systems marked red on the right bottom side. And if these warning systems were reported by patients, then the hospital contacted the patient and tried to figure those out. And with this approach, the Denise group was able to demonstrate that this modern follow-up, individualized follow-up approach led to a survival benefit of more than 3 months in an advanced non-small cell lung cancer setting. So to sum up, for us as clinicians, exciting times in lung cancer for the patients, and this is most important, very promising times, because we are now about to significantly improve the outcomes of the so far still deadly disease of lung cancer. And I'm really convinced that IDERHA will provide you with intelligent platform and AI solutions for different stakeholder groups. So not only for us as clinicians and researchers, but also for the public and healthcare providers, by integrating health data that are out there within modern healthcare systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thorsten. This was an excellent introduction. And one thing that you should all know, Thorsten was not only a fundamental driver to drive lung cancer screening in Germany, but has been an absolutely key driver with his teams to drive it in Europe, to make this possible, to really identify lung cancer earlier. And thank you for this. And for moving from there, I would like to give you an introduction into IDERHA. Is the presentation working, or? Yes. Okay. It's not, the clicker is not taking myself. No, the clicker should be going. Okay, good. And I would like to give you like an overview. How does lung cancer and what Thorsten just presented connect with IDERHA? IDERHA is an acronym which actually stands for 2 different projects that are combined. It's about the integration of health data and evidence as one part, where we'll take a lot of time on, but also where we will have a complete session on later on. It's about the regulatory and HTA acceptance, because with all the innovation that is possible these days, we don't get anywhere if it doesn't reach the benefit for patients. And that's why we try to drive with IDERHA the complete rainbow, as we say, from the beginning to the end, hence also the two parts of IDERHA. So it's not an acronym that where we searched the net and said which word doesn't exist. This really actually stands for the data space as well as the regulatory and HTA acceptance of heterogeneous health data. Coming a little bit from history, where do we come from? Why do we take up IDERHA as such? Erwin mentioned it already. Thanks to the European Union, who has created a fund, the so-called Innovative Health Initiative Fund, money was put forward in order to work together, have industries, universities, clinicians, patients, and I very much thank especially the patients that are here today to engage and work together to drive tangible benefits, to drive healthcare in Europe forward on topics that no one can do by themselves. They're big topics. And what the European Union has done with Innovative Health Initiative, put the clinicians and the patients in the center and look, what kind of topics do you have? What kind of areas are there that needs to be taken forward? And what you see here on the left are the first call topics that were launched in 2022. It's about patient-facing pathways, and very much so, and that's the one in red, is the IDERHA one, where the European Union or the Innovative Health Initiative released a call about access and integration of heterogeneous health data for improved healthcare. That was the call that was submitted in June 2022, to which we as an IDERHA team responded. And doing so, we took two big decisions. If you look into the call text itself, basically it's all about the EHDS. The EHDS was, and I jump back to that, was basically created by the European Council in 2021, where it says we recognize the need to accelerate the creation of common data spaces, including and ensuring the access of interoperability of data. That's exactly what the IHI then asked a couple of months later people to do and to come up with ideas how to do it. And the second part is very much on lung cancer. Thorsten presented it very impressively already. Lung cancer can be better cured the earlier it is detected. And we hope that with an IDERHA, we can play a small role within that journey towards earlier detection. And I will show you how we believe that we can potentially, hopefully, be able to do so. Going back to the data spaces, you will all have heard about the European Health Data Space, but that's only the start. Due to COVID, the European Union has decided with all the data spaces that they plan to do, and that's an official slide from the European Union, to say we want to have data spaces across all major industries with a common structure, common process, common infrastructure, with one data within the data space support center, for example, but we will start with health. And I'm actually very proud that one of the key leading partners of the data space support center that has been just established is one of the key partners in IDERHA, the Fraunhofer ISST here out of Germany. So really it's about starting data spaces in Europe and with health. And we believe that with IDERHA, we can create some clear learning. What could a data space look like? What could be a good tangible solution? What kind of technology is there? How can data be made secure? Because if we look into other industries, we are definitely in the industry on the area where the data needs to be most protected. And I'm very happy to have later on a speech on the legal framework to really establish trust that data is taken care of and trusted. And so we really want to do a dual layer of secure technology plus a secure governance model. Before I go there, another aspect, another approach that we are taking is not about reinventing. So basically what this system picture should symbolize to you. We try to take what is out there already, basically different kind of raw materials, but with these raw materials, you can either create ivory towers and be by yourself and say, look, we are wonderful and great. I mean, I love this building, don't get me wrong. But we see ourselves much more like bridges, like combining, and that's why we're here today. We have taken last year, we started with IDERHA a year ago. We needed to create and understand each other. And now we are ready to present to you, get feedback from you to understand, is that what we envision? How does that resonate with you? Getting your feedback, but then also starting to connect and coming from there. And that's basically where we start from today. How are we doing this? We have been able to bring 33 leading partners from all over Europe and strong international support together from academia and research, from industry, associated partners. So basically spread all over Europe. And why have we been able and come together as these partners? If you look at our expertise in the different areas that is needed, we believe we've really brought some enormously strong expertise in different areas together to really play together. So that, again, not starting from scratch, but really learning from each other, coming together and really benefiting from each other. This is really where I truly believe that the European Union offers us a fantastic opportunity to drive projects like IDERHA forward to really make a difference. So what are we asked to do and what are we aiming to do? And that's very much in a nutshell what we're aiming to do as an IDERHA. We are aiming to get access to data out of hospital care from individual patients within wearables. We also will have a great patient consent app where we can really go into direct connection with patients and citizens, and then also clinical trial data. So really diverse access from diverse data. And we want to bring this together with a strong governance and legal framework based on technical infrastructure to thereby enable health solutions. And those health solutions within our use cases will be very much focusing on lung cancer. IDERHA will be disease agnostic, but we will definitely start within lung cancer. And as we aim to expand our network in these days, we will also aim to, first of all, look into lung cancer cases and then go from there. And the use cases that we are taking forward about an AI algorithm about lung cancer risk prognosis. So for example, what is my personal risk for developing lung cancer? How can AI help me? Should I be included in a screening program? Yes or no? So far, it's more random, but to be much more precise, because it's definitely not only smokers. There are many, many other people that develop lung cancer and have other risk factors. How can those be identified? How can those be better seen? So really getting a better risk prognosis. I supported, as Thorsten just said, to bring all the data together. And then if I'm, for example, in that screening program, to have also the lung cancer screening with the CT screening being supported and get a better support from there. And also another part that Thorsten mentioned in his presentation, it's not only we are looking at the beginning, but also when people are in treatment, and we will have a big study to assess how can remote patient monitoring, so when patients are between their chemotherapy circles, is there a way that there can be a close integration with patients, that there's a quick and fast understanding if the patients don't feel well, if there's a change going on, and here AI and wearables plus interactive apps really bring a way forward. Furthermore, we will develop further solutions and use exactly these kind of learnings to then go into the discussions with politicians and I'll say, hey, these are data-enabled solutions. How do we bring them into reality? From a technology perspective, I try to make it very simple. We will ensure a governance model that it is clear who is allowed to access whose data with a very clear legal framework, and then build a technical solution to connect the data requester with the data holder. So it's basically, that's the kind of connectivity we are aiming to do as a strong network. What is important? What's the difference about a data space versus a data lake? I always think in fishes. My son loves to fish. In a data lake, you put all the fish together in one central pond. In a data space, the data stays where it is. And that's what we try to do here. There's a data request that is sent to the data holder. The compute is taking place at the site where the data is, and only the results go back so that the patient's data has a maximum protection. It's not the ambition to shift any patient data anywhere outside the environment it is in, for example, at the hospital or so on. And that's the whole consideration about data spaces. That's very simple about the principles, and we build on existing principles that have been developed, for example, by the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health infrastructure, about the International Data Space Standard. So it's not about new things, but combining it in a new way. With that, IDERHA will really align and aims to align with the European data space principles. More about that later, but really about common governments and data formats to enable different players, being it researcher, patients, healthcare professionals, regulators, policymakers, to connect with each other and access the data to get more personalized insight of the health data that is out there. But all of that would be nothing, absolutely nothing, if it would not be possible to bring it together. And that's where the RHA part comes in, and where I'm really proud to have all the discussions that are going in to have really with that objective, patients, clinicians, authorities, and industry sit together, reflect on what is currently happening in that space, because it's highly dynamic. It's the Health Data Access and Sharing developing. The AI Act is just out. We have EHDS has just been released. How does all of that play together? And how can we then together develop consensus recommendations? What could be a good way forward in order to bring IDERHA ideas and obviously other ideas into life? And with that, I would like to hand over to Sumit. Thank you very much. Yes. That we are all waiting. We will have, after Sumit's presentation, we will then have time for questions. That's sort of that one. So please think of your questions for Thorsten, Sumit, especially myself, so that we can then go into question. But we thought, let's close the chapter, that you get a good overview, and then we bring everything together from there.
Perfect. Thanks, Katja. Thanks, Christian. Yeah, so we have talked about lung cancer screening, as Thorsten explained, how this efforts are actually being taken over in Europe. And also we have heard from Christian how the IDERHA is actually supporting that, right? So I will just shortly introduce the topic artificial intelligence, and actually how we want to use artificial intelligence to perform patient data analysis in general, and also how this is being done in IDERHA, right? So some words on myself. So my name is Sumit Madan, and I'm senior researcher and also data scientist at the Department of Bioinformatics of Fraunhofer SKY in Germany. So let me just show you a small example how an EHR looks like. So this is an example of a structured EHR data. So a patient has certain information. There is gender available, patient name, for example. But as soon as the patient visited the hospital or general practice, their data is collected on diagnosis, medication, some lab results are being provided, and this is collected sometimes in a structured manner, but also in clinical notes in a written form, narrative form. And there are like various types of visits, right? So you have inpatient visit where a hospital stay was maybe necessary. Then there is an outpatient visit. The patient visited the hospital or GP, and certain information has been collected and there was no need for a hospital stay. Emergency visits are also possible, and these are collected in this EHR data sets. So shortly, why we actually collect EHRs? So obviously to gather the medical information on patients, right? And these are routinely collected in these healthcare systems. And let me shortly also talk about the chances and limitation of these EHRs. So EHR represent actually a highly abundant data. So as we already mentioned, that they are collected over long time periods, right? So these are quite valuable data because they provide a health status of patients, which can be utilized in many ways. But there are also limitations, right? So most of this data is actually collected while we want to also bill the patient, right, or the insurance. So there is a coding bias towards billing in this in these EHRs, and these EHRs lack certain data sets like disease-specific biomarkers or severity scores or other type of data because these are not collected in EHRs. These are actually part of the observation and clinical studies that we perform regularly in research. But nevertheless, so these data are still used for various purposes, right? So we can actually try to assess disease risks. Has been done for various type of diseases, but also to check whether a treatment is actually stable or whether treatment is helping or not, right? We can also detect adverse events. So medications are prescribed, and if there are like rare adverse events for certain types of patients, these are reported in these EHRs. So one can actually try to detect those adverse events in these EHRs. Right, so there are like many ways to utilize such data. So let me show you small examples how actually these AI methods are being used on clinical notes. For example, here, narrative notes are being collected by physicians, by clinical experts, and they contain various types of information. So here, the notes are from cardiology, neurology, psychiatry departments, right? So in neurology, if a patient who might have an Alzheimer goes to a physician and then there are certain tests performed, right? So the neurophysiological tests are being performed. These are reported in certain documents, and one can actually use AI methods to structure those, to extract actually the information from clinical notes and structure this information and put it in databases. One can actually extract information on disturbances, whether there are problems with the memory, with language or orientation. And certain lab measurements are also reported in these clinical notes. One can actually extract data on blood samples from these notes, but also diagnosis, comorbidities. For example, if a patient has Alzheimer's disease, but it has also some heart disease or so, these are mentioned in those notes, and these are extracted from those notes through AI methods. So the data is kind of made available as a structured data, and this structured data can be utilized further, right? So here I present an example where we actually used records from 3.5 million US patients, where we have actually used their medical history to build a huge AI model. And this is a really huge AI model with millions of parameters. And this AI model was used to predict actually acute respiratory manifestation in COVID-19. So whether a patient has a risk of going into ICU for mechanical ventilation or so. Right, so these models are quite sophisticated and help us to predict various kind of risk for various diseases. Also in medical imaging, these AI models are being used to classify certain parts of the image or predict certain parts of the image too. So here we have a CT image for patient probably with lung cancer, right? So the AI method can actually help us to find regions, lung nodules that are maybe of concern or maybe not of concern, right? So malignant or benign. So these examples have already been actually used and also developed. But in IDERHA, we want to focus further on lung cancer risk profiling, as Professor Thorsten Blum mentioned, right? So we have, so our task is actually to use these EHR records and also imaging data and generate AI models to assess for patients whether there is a high risk of lung cancer in future or maybe a low risk of lung cancer in future, right? So how do we want to do that? So we want to actually use federated learning, as Christian mentioned, right? So this data is actually lying in the hospitals. We have the data holders, as you see below. 3 partners will provide data in IDERHA. These are Spanish partners. And in federated learning, there are other parties who are involved. So there are algorithm developers, for example, for Technical University of Munich, who has an expertise in imaging analysis with AI models, will provide algorithms for imaging, and Fraunhofer Sky will actually provide algorithms that can process this structured EHR data. And we will provide our algorithms to University of Luxembourg, who has a task in this project to execute this federated learning, right? So the University of Luxembourg will take the algorithms, send it to the local data holders, and the federated learning processes there, and we actually get a model for lung cancer risk profiling. And I want to emphasize that the patient data actually stays in their respective hospital information system, so it will never leave out these silos, for example. Only the model will be provided at the end. So what does actually the future hold for us, right? So in our task, in our project, we will just have one use case of lung cancer risk profiling, but federated learning in medicine can actually go beyond that. So IDERHA is actually creating a huge infrastructure so that other researchers, other data holders can take part in this IDERHA infrastructure, right? So IDERHA federated infrastructure will actually support more connected hospitals. It will allow us to perform more clinical studies for various kind of diseases, and it will somehow connect also the regions and countries in EU, because our population in EU is diverse. We want to find also the differences, right, in this in these countries. So in short summary, we want to actually advance with federated infrastructure, the medicine. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Does it work? Excellent. Thanks a lot, Sumit. Now, there was a lot that you needed to take in. I'm very aware of that. I hope it wasn't too much. Now we are really interested in questions. Is there any questions from the audience, or we have something from online I just hear?
Yeah, we
Rebecca?
have an online.
Then that's ladies first. You're sitting here, please.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. My name is Viorica Cursaru, and I'm the president of Myeloma Euronet Romania. I think that you are one of the speakers, and I would like to quote, I would like to quote your statements to the extent possible. You said that if we get together, clinicians and patients and other relevant stakeholders, there will be nothing to prevent us from achieving our objectives. A fantastic objective, a fantastic goal.
You may quote me with this, but in fact,
Yeah. My question to you, sir, having in mind that the well-being of a patient, the quality of life, the life expectancy depend a lot on the access to treatment and medication. And having in mind the present disparities within Europe, do you intend to include access to treatment and medication in one of your programs and discuss it with the European authorities, approach the subject, give some kind of weight, because after all, you are an European organization and your words count a lot more than the words of a national organization such as mine. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very important point. First of all, I think there are biannual reports from FPIA, that's the European pharmacy or pharmaceutical company umbrella organization that also reports on disparities, inequalities in terms of access to modern drugs. And there is a variation from, I don't know, something like 100 days from EMA approval to access in Germany for more than, I think, 900 days, I think, in your country. I think if we are capable within IDERHA to set platform solutions that can map pathways, and mapping pathways means also what kind of drugs do patients receive in lung cancer. For example, how does perioperative systemic therapies look like in early stage non-small cell lung cancer? Then I think if we are multicentric, if we are multinational, and that is clearly our aim, then we are, of course, also able to highlight the discrepancies, the inequalities of access to modern drugs. So it's not, let's say, on the first points. First of all, we need to set up the infrastructure. We need to address the use cases that we have promised to deal with in our application. But of course, we are also thinking into the future and thinking into sustainability, and this is certainly a point that we should look for.
Rebecca, there's another. Maybe we do it iterative. You start with.
Yep, we have a nice question here. I'll just read it. We heard a lot now about the ideal scenarios of data gathered in the EHRs, electronic health records. There are many problems with these records, such as data quality and clinician burnout related to the EHR use. I'm curious what IDERHA's approach is given this context. Are we just assuming that these problems are going to improve? How are we mitigating the risks given the current challenges with these records?
Excellent question. Maybe I take this one on behalf of others. Absolutely right. With an IDERHA, we will, maybe I try to go back to the camera here. Sorry. Morning. So basically, with an IDERHA, we will not explicitly focus on improving health records or this kind of problem. We are really looking more about building an infrastructure that will give access to data. However, with an IDERHA, we have built our 2 AI use cases on electronic health records with data providers or data holders, hospitals that have implemented the OMOP common data model, which is a data model that has been developed or implemented across 200 major hospitals as we speak in Europe within a project similar like IDERHA, the Eden project, and where it's really about a common data model that can be used and that also drives the curation from data. That's one part where we believe this is actually one of the best data sources that can be used. For example, the EMA, the European Medicines Agency, is using the OMOP common data model as well for their real-world evidence. And the second part that we're using is the DICOM data, which is the imaging data, which by its nature is complete. I mean, Subit and your team, you're very aware about these electronic health records, and I'm very proud that we have Deepak Caldera and his team also within IDERHA. Deepak is here, and they are driving with their team very much about data quality and trust in health data moving forward. And there's a lot going on at the European Union in order to drive and improve the health data quality. However, coming back to the questions, we as IDERHA are explicitly not focusing on data curation and those aspects, because there are a lot of others that are focusing, and we try to slice all these different aspects within improving access to data and enabling things like Thorsten just mentioned by being a small piece in it by trying to build a bridge. And the next.
Can
I'd go over to the auditor.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Juliane Fluck, and I'm the head of the National Research Data Infrastructure for Health Data in Germany. And we are intending to do the same what you're doing on the European level, on the German level. but mainly for public data. And my question would be first, so how do you interact first with the government institutes, which are the local nodes of the EHDS, how it is called, and to integrate, I assume you would like also to integrate insurance data as one kind of the data and do data linkage. That would be my first question. And as I'm from Germany and I would like really to cooperate with you, the question, what kind of networks do you already have in Germany to interact with the different German infrastructure, such as Medical Informatics Initiative, the NUM, Raccoon, and stuff like that?
Excellent. Great question. Thank you that you're here.
Sorry, this works perfectly also, just to throw it in. Online, there is this similar question about are local data providers partners in IDERHA, or will there be a call for other hospitals to join IDERHA as contributing data provider?
Perfect. Then I answer these two questions together very briefly. This is our first, we have been starting a year ago with a clear mandate from the European Union of the Innovative Health Initiative and started as we are. Today, we are going public and actually share what we would like to do. Last year, we've been mainly trying to organize ourselves, becoming clear where we want to go and how we want to move forward. And this is really starting from today officially to collaborate with people like you. And we have been starting to connect with others. We will, for example, have a keynote speaker from another health data space initiative at our meeting tomorrow. And we are looking to drive and increase our network connectivity as much as we can. Hence, we are also building our data infrastructure on existing standards so that it's possible to bring different data spaces together. And I'm looking forward to the discussion and see how we can collaborate in the best possible way. We see IDERHA as an opportunity based on the EHDS standards as much as we understand them today, and they will obviously change over time to be more a private data network for specific research questions to drive that one forward. Okay, thank you. More questions? I don't want to Thorsten, not to Sumit.
My name is Alena Marusakova, and I'm a representative of patients. I'd like to ask a question regarding this predictive modeling and connection with risk factors. As it looks like we are able to use only these factors, which are known already. And is it going to be like a living organism that we can add in the future some other factors which are not described yet or not yet? Or is it going to be like, how do you think about that? Because usually even in health records, there are only the data we were able to know to gather in that time, but probably today we know a bit more, especially with these different receptors and mutation, and it's evolving all the time. New.
I think for
thank you.
That's a very, very good question. So one of the first use cases we are working on are risk factors or risk models within lung cancer screening or even before lung cancer screening to define people at high risk for lung cancer. So as you're probably all aware, the current or the majority of the current planned or running lung cancer screening programs within Europe are based on age and smoking exposition as a risk factor. So it's a risk-based approach. But there are up to 30 other risk models that, as you said, include much more factors like comorbidities, COPD, emphysema, fibrotic lung disease, but also family history of cancer, personal history of previous cancers that really raise independently the risk for lung cancer. So one approach could be and probably will be that within our IDERHA platforms and also available data sets, we can validate already existing risk models. But if we are taking into account large clinical data sets, administrative data sets, then we also have much more parameters, and potentially there may be also some that could add up or could prove as independent risk factors. And of course, these kind of risk models should be at least adaptable in the future if new factors become available. We could even think of some, let's say, environmental factors like radon exposure, for example. There are countries which have a radon map that could be linked also to personal data.
Yeah, I can shortly extend on that. So I have shown actually that we want to use EHR data, right? So what I have not yet shown that we actually also want to utilize socioeconomic data that is available in those regions where we get data from, right? Also environmental data will be used here. And as soon as we perform a data-driven analysis, so we are actually doing that, performing that without any biases, without any information that we have in the background, right? So all the factors that we know, for example, will come up at the end as risk factors, but maybe there are some other factors in the data sets which might pop up also in the top list, right? At the end, we also want to know that and want to know actually those risk factors, and we'll try to interpret at the end why these risk factors are coming in the list.
So thank you very much. These were very important and good questions. There are more questions that came in from the audio, from online. Looking at the time, I think we would make a stop now for a break. Continue the discussion. I've seen there was another question. We'll definitely take yours up, and anything that came online, we will definitely respond to that one. We will, and then that this doesn't got lost. But let's have a break till 10:35, half an hour. For the audience that is online as well, please, that we have half an hour, and then we start punctual at 10:35. And looking forward to the discussions during the break. Thank you. all data comes together. Same thing came from Sumit. So all of this comes together. Sumit will focus on the important aspect of solidarity. There's a lot about opt-in, opt-out these days, and I'm very much looking forward to your presentation and then obviously to your questions. We will again have 3 presentations. Afterwards, we have from Nadia presenting on the European Health Data Space, and then Anne will present on the legal framework, and then we will have questions again so that we have a little bit of a flow. So, stage is yours. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. So just to give you, maybe this works. Oh, it works. I don't see it here, but maybe. Yeah, I can do that. Maybe. No problem. Thank you. So now we will discuss a little bit about the solidarity topic that's been going on, because until the European Health Data Space conversations, before COVID-19 problems, actually, the patients' involvement or citizens' involvement in the conversations were not very much there. It was starting, but it kind of rocketed up because everybody realized that solidarity is something very important for us to move forward. And the question came up then, why would I give access to my health data? What is in it for me? What do I gain out of this? So at EPF, European Patients Forum, we started actually 5 years ago an initiative that I would like to mention to you a little bit about and go into the detail about where IDERHA is going to hopefully integrate and work with us, and we will work with them in terms of having an understanding of health data and importance of sharing health data, responsible health data. So just to give you a brief explanation about what we've been doing, is this conversation about health data 101 is very crucial. We know there are different levels here in this room and online today that know more about health data, less about health data, but we need to actually kind of have a common language for us to be able to talk to each other. Knowing does not mean you can communicate. So that's where different groups of people get involved to get a multi-stakeholder conversation, which is very hard when it comes to different levels of understanding of the topic. And to start, the most important thing is we know it's a complex area. It's not very enjoyable. It's kind of a boring topic to talk about. And it's moving very fast. So certain groups are actually panicking about the fast pace of these conversations going ahead with data, health data, and an AI conversation. And it's also transformed the new digital ways of storing, enhancing, and analyzing data. So it's changed a lot of things very fast. So we know that in the last 5 years, there has been more data generated, health data generated, scientific data generated in the entire history of mankind. That's quite scary when you think about it, when from the public side of it, when you look at it. And there are a lot of examples, numerous examples of situations in which this has happened, and it's very difficult to explain them in a story, use cases, user stories, because health data topics are not owned by the patient. They cannot just go out there saying, I've been to this clinical trial, and they can, but it's not really an own story. It is actually a shared story because you got your healthcare professional involved, clinical trial researchers are involved, there are different data analysts involved, so they cannot really go out there and explain about their use case or story as if it's theirs. So what we know is the whole conversation about the complex topic. Outcome is not always clear. So, okay, is there a drug out of this data analysis of my clinical trial? Am I going to be cured tomorrow? Or it's going to happen? Like, is it going to save my, actually children? Because I have a genetic disease, is it going to? We cannot tell the outcomes clearly of data topics or data work that's going around health. What is in it for me kind of comes as an example as well, and can be quite dry, as we know. That could be numbers and kind of stories that might not be interesting for many people. and what's the story, which is one of those things difficult to explain, tell a story about health data topics. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this because I know many of you are aware, but what is health data? And it's the whole discussions about electronic health records, like national databases, prescription lab tests. So what we have done at EPF is actually we took these slides, we took them to our members, and we said, okay, who's interested in learning a little bit more about health data topics and also ask questions about them. So we went to our different, we did booth camps around the topic. We did have it between our members. So we opened a call, they joined in, we did in-person booth camps. We also started to do national level booth camps now, and we are starting to actually have the translations of this topic, these slides simply, and the toolkit that we developed, but it's another story. So what we also covered was the big data, because that was a conversation which did not exist in the patients community, is what is there? Because my data, I'm sure, is not enough, but what do you do with that big data? So we tried to explain to them where all these big data collected from and what it actually does and what it can generally do, and it can influence, in fact, impact millions of individuals' lives. That your personal data is not enough. It has to have a big structure, big data structure around it. So we used really common words and we tried to explain to them in the basic sense, because that was the whole purpose of our members' understanding about the data topics. And also we kind of gave them why health data is so valuable. It's not only about their personal understanding or their own benefit from it, but it's this solidarity. So health data landscape is changing rapidly. How can you be part of that system? And how can you contribute just slight, maybe contributions? And very importantly, responsible health data sharing is one of the key things we always talked about within this initiative. And then, of course, one of the key things we received from our members is they always want to know who is having the access to my data, which is going on with the European Health Data Space conversations. You're going to hear it later on. It's people do not really have a big issue, especially patient communities, of sharing their health data. Quite the opposite. It's just they would like to know what's behind the scenes, what's happening in the primary use, as well as, of course, the secondary use is a bigger question mark. But even in the primary use, they would like to know. So in this project, it's quite crucial for us to be able to talk about the legal framework and the infrastructure we build around the data access, and we clearly communicate it to the patients community, as well as actually gradually with the public forum to the citizens. That's where we would be able to explain who accesses your data is these communities, but as well, there is a very solid infrastructure around it that you do not need to worry. We're doing everything possible to actually safely move forward with your data access. And then the secondary use is one of those key questions that always come up as well from our community, is we're using these smart devices, and a lot of patient communities use actually smart devices. It's quite useful for them. Of course, there is inclusivity issues with the age groups, and we do have to recognize the fact that there are certain groups cannot use smart devices, and we still have to work on the age and accessibility to digital devices. And this is one of those key questions we get. And what we are doing is actually with the Data Saves Lives initiative is how can we, so we cluster different benefits for patients, benefits for healthcare professional, benefits for healthcare providers, healthcare systems, sorry, and the medical research, so that they can actually identify a little bit more about not just the overall, common good, solidarity, because we are here in this world, we have to do something, but actually a bit more granular understanding of the different communities benefit from health data, responsible health data sharing. So from my side, that will be more or less it. I just want to briefly mention to you a little bit about the importance also about localization. We had these questions coming up as well. EU level work is great. So I think in IDERHA, we are also going to try and focus on these as well, trying to maybe see more and more national, especially in the communication sense, on dissemination part of the work we're doing. It's quite crucial for us to be able to reach the national nodes and be able to get the national authorities to be able to recognize and know about the work we're doing, because EU level has limits, as we all know, but national level actually can have the hands-on work really reaching a conclusion, a solution. So I think we're not having the questions right now, so I will leave it to the end of the session.
Yeah, maybe one question while Nadia is
If any, yeah.
is preparing, handing over. Is there any one question, and then Nadia, you just prepare? But thank you, Götzke, because I have to say data security and trusting that nothing is happening with the health data is absolutely fundamental. And I think that's one thing really that we all have as an IDERHA in common. Obviously, we want to have access to data, but leave it where it is to make it very secure. And I always use the example of, just imagine Google would just offer a traffic jam kind of solution. We would make the data available and would benefit from it, or there are others in the traffic jam, and then we can avoid it, or in other times we make our data available and then others can avoid the traffic jam. I think there's quite some similarity with health data. However, Google is just using this in order to then sell our data that we make available for other purposes. This is exactly not what we're doing. We would be using health data in a solidaric act for the purpose of enabling others to benefit from that health data that we make available, or we can benefit from others and not make the data used in a way that we don't know. And that's what we really, really care a lot about. So thank you very much. Yes, please. And then Nadia, please.
I have to admit that I do believe in data, in the collection of data. However, from time to time, weird thoughts are crossing through my mind. And right now, I'm trying to be the devil's advocate. And I'm asking you, is there any slight likelihood that this data can be used, to the detriment of the patients? And who would be using those data? Because I have, for example, I told you that I'm the president of myeloma, multiple myeloma, and I have to convince my patients, the members of my organization, that this would be for their entire benefit. But if any of them will raise such a question, I would not be able to respond 100% as to induce full confidence. Thank you very much.
So this question comes up a lot within our members in any event we attend to. So in this project particularly, I wouldn't be able to say indeed, but I know federated data sharing is one of those. So what you could do is actually you can put the safeguards as much as you can. There is never 100%, but you can put the safeguards in place as much as you can, legal frameworks as well as good infrastructures that actually make sure the percentages are the lowest in terms of these kinds of risks. But when you put the risks and benefits, that's one of the key things we say. It's very important to be able to show our members or in the society risks and benefits and put them in a balance and then let them decide. There is no forcing people. We can only put the facts out there and they take it or they don't. It's up to them. And it sometimes takes time for people to get used to these discussions and feel comfortable and feel okay about sharing health data. It's not something that should be forced on them. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I think this is an excellent start for you, Nadia, to look into. So what will the EHDS bring and where do we see it? And looking forward to the further discussions later on.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So yes, my name is Nadia Kartschmidt and I'm working at the Medical University of Vienna. And we heard a lot about the European Health Data Space, and I will just dive a bit deeper into this topic and also familiarize you with the synergy and alignment opportunities IDERHA has with this ambitious initiative. So I would like to start with a quote from Stella Kyriakides. She's the European Commissioner for Food Health and Food Safety. And this was published in a press release on the 5th of March this year, because you might know that this was a milestone in the regulation or the legislation process, because the Council and the Parliament reached a provisional agreement on the text. And this quote summarizes the two parts of the EHDS, and we have heard it also in the last presentation from Göste, that there's a primary and secondary use. And this will be also the case in the EHDS. So the first one refers to the primary use. So the European Health Data Space will enable patients to share health data within and across member states as they wish. So with their healthcare providers, also when they are on holidays, for example, in another country. So this will be facilitated. And at the same time, it will unleash the potential of health data for the development of innovative and life-saving treatments and devices, as well as for better health policy making. So this can be rather referred to as a secondary use. So the primary use is also referred to as My Health Data at EU, or EHDS1, just that you heard about it. And the secondary use is also referred to as health data at EU. So there are a lot of opportunities that lie in this initiative for different stakeholders. There's also different stakeholders that are present now in this public forum. For citizens, the aim is to that they will be able to access and share their health data, to add information, and also to correct errors in the entries and to restrict also the access. And they also can obtain the information on how the data are used, for example, when they were used for secondary purposes. Healthcare professionals would have a faster and easier access to health records, as I mentioned, within but also across borders. And researchers would benefit because they could access to large amount of health data of high quality, and this would be very efficient and relatively cheap when compared to, for example, cohort studies that are now currently used for generating this evidence. And also regulatory and policy makers would have the same benefit, as they could easily and transparently access health data, and with this ensuring the public health benefit. And also the industry would benefit from it, because there would be new markets for electronic health data records, also in other member states. And this would enable also to use this data for innovation purposes. And I would stress also that citizens or patients would, of course, also benefit from the work that would be done from healthcare professionals, from researchers, from regulatories, in industry also, because they would benefit from the results they generate. So you see that these opportunities of the European Health Data Space align very much to the aims of IDERHA also. I just want to say a quick note on the timeline, just to demonstrate that it has been a long way, but still it is a long way to go until the EHDS will actually be in place. So in 2020, the proposal to create the EHDS was announced. And this was, you all remember, 2020, the year of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the COVID-19 pandemic really revealed where the problems were in data sharing, and also in the use of existing health data for generating evidence and conducting research. So this is something that the EHDS tries to solve to some extent. Before the text was in place, or the first version of the text was in place, there was also an impact assessment and a public consultation. And then in 2022, the European Commission published the EHDS proposal. And this was, of course, discussed several times. The presidency presented compromise text and also a progress report, and then there were lead committee votes and the plenary vote. And this year, there were also the trilogue negotiations that then concluded in the provisional agreement in March 2024. So we are here now. And so the final text will be out soon. However, until it is really applicable, it will take 2 years after entry into force. So entry into force means that the final text will be published in the journal, in the official journal of the European Union, and 20 days after that, the legislation will enter into force. However, the majority will not enter into force after 2 years, but it will take 4 or 6 years respectively, depending on the data types for the secondary use, but also for the primary use. It will not be applicable right away. So that you see that it's still a long way to go. So I just want to focus on the secondary use because this is also important in IDERHA, and we have heard about the use of data for identifying patients with risk of developing lung cancer or having early stages of lung cancer. So this is why I focus on the secondary use, and I just want to show you the architecture also just to see that it's very much aligned to IDERHA. So a lot of things will sound very familiar from the things you know now from IDERHA. So this is a TEDAS proposal on health data at EU architecture. So TEDAS was a project with the aim to support the member states and coming up with recommendations on how the European health data space will actually work in practice. And they recommended this architecture. However, it is important to say that so there will be, or they can still be changes here, but this is just to illustrate the general idea behind this. So we have the data subjects. So data subjects are people using the healthcare systems, using wearables, other medical devices. So actually the population. This was discussed very much. So I just wanted to state that there is also an opt-out possible for the secondary use. So the patients or the people can also say that they don't want the data to be used for secondary purposes. However, there's an exemption, and this is when public bodies require this data in the interest of the public health of the public. So this is one exemption. And there are the data holders. Data holders could be hospitals, government institutions, research institutions, and the EHDS also defines some minimum categories of data. We have heard about electronic health records, this would fall into this. Also socioeconomic data, we have heard about it also. Could be also genomic data. So there's a whole list, a broad list of categories. And then there's the data user. So the data user can be a research institution, a university, a regulator, an innovator, industry, and they can request the data to be used for secondary purposes. However, they are permitted and prohibited purposes. So permitted purposes would be to use the data for research and innovation, and prohibited purposes would be for advertising or requests or to assess requests from insurance companies. So then for example, research at a university can take a look at the data catalog and see what data are available that could be used. And then they would have to request the data and ask for a permit at the health data access bodies. So the health data access bodies would process this request and deny the request or give access to the data. based on cumulative qualitative criteria. And then these data would be assessed and processed in secure processing environments. So this is what you also have heard before. So the data stay at the data holder level. There's no connection between data holder and data user. But this is all will take place in a secure processing environment. So secure processing environment means an environment that ensures the organizational and technical measures and to comply with the data protection at union law level. So for example, the general data protection regulation. And this is also something that will sound familiar from what you have heard, how this will actually be in IDERHA. So there are a lot of similarities. So there are obviously alignment and synergy opportunities. And on two levels, I would say. So IDERHA and EHDS, of course, share the legal framework. So the EHDS has a strong link to both past and current legislations and regulations. For example, as I mentioned, the General Data Protection Regulation, it will build upon this regulation, and also the Data Governance Act, and also has strong links to the Artificial Intelligence Act. And also this is where IDERHA will align with these legal frameworks. And you will also hear about this later in the next presentation. And as I mentioned, the technical framework. So I have shown you the architecture of the how it is planned in EHDS, and you have heard about also before. So IDERHA wants to align with secure environments. Interoperability is something that we discuss very much in the group. Data format standardization also. So so these are opportunities to align, and we as a project can of course share expertise and lessons learned, because we are at this stage also developing the frameworks now, and that we can also build recommendations for the EHDS. On the other hand, we also have to align to the specifications that will be made then in the EHDS. So of course, it's very important to monitor the development of the EHDS and to be prepared once the EHDS is in place, so that we are aligned to the greatest extent possible. And of course, we are not working in a vacuum. We are one project of many projects. I would just like to show there are also, of course, other projects and initiatives. And as also was said or mentioned before, the idea is to boost also collaboration here, and to also benefit from the lessons learned of other projects, and to collaborate and to share the expertise we have, and also to benefit from the expertise the others also have. So thank you. I will stop here and
Thank you very much, Nadia. This was really impressive, and I think we now take it forward. Your presentation goes very seamlessly forward from a legal framework, how the legal team within IDERHA is envisioning to take it forward. You've heard about the technical framework earlier in the last session. Now Anna will take you to the legal framework, and then we can have discussions around that aspect. Don't know, Anna, if you've got a mic already or you're just getting prepared. That's excellent. But as I opened at the beginning, really stated, the HDS, the decision was taken, the HDS should be created, then the Innovative Health Initiative, very much driven around health innovation in Europe, was taken forward and asked us and others to come up with a call, and that's how we try to respond on it. And I'm really looking forward to your questions in a couple of minutes, and how, if we're on the right track, how you see it and how we can collaborate with you.
Yeah, sure.
see if it works. Lädt noch wahrscheinlich. Entschuldigung. It's hello everybody. It's my fault because I added a slide in the last moment, so now everything has to be reset on that behalf. Sorry for that. Maybe I can just use the few seconds to introduce myself. My name is Anne Funk Hansen. I'm from Denmark originally, but I'm here in my capacity as the Deputy Data Protection Officer of Fraunhofer and also a privacy counselor at Fraunhofer. And I'm supporting IDERHA in both capacities, helping to identify a data sharing framework that can facilitate the ambitious purposes set in IDERHA. I'm doing that together with other organizations, of course, in various working groups. So what you're going to see now is, of course, the work of many, and it's actually intended to demonstrate to you where we stand right now. So it's a small report from the machine room, so to say, in the facilitation of what is going to take place within IDERHA from a legal point of view. So yes, so this was what I intended it to look like, taking over where Nadia left. We're now going a bit deeper into this special aspect, the legal framework, prominently the General Data Protection Regulation, seeing that it's still the key benchmark and denominator of the legal requirements we have to comply with when we share data, but also, of course, other applicable legislation to be considered within the legal framework. Yes, so the task that we have is an ambitious one because we are creating a demonstrator from a technical and an enabling point of view, but we have to do it, of course, to the terms of the presence. We do not yet have the EHDS, so we cannot utilize the EHDS as a legal basis. We have to comply entirely with existing statutory requirements, so we're very much fixed in the presence, and nonetheless, we still want to function as a legal demonstrator and to demonstrate what future data sharing, creating trust and transparency can look like. So we've set out to unveil the essentials and also learn a few lessons from other projects in the past. There's no way circumvening the fact that things have not always been run that perfectly from a legal point of view. In the past, we have many projects where we just had too little data processing, too little facilitation of research, and too many legal constraints. Of course, the legal constraints are as they are, but the way you deal with them matter a great deal. So a key purpose that we also pursue is to eliminate redundance. If it's not increasing compliance in the project, then we should not do it. And we really want to cut to the chase of both these things in order to enhance compliance and enable data sharing. So it should not be an either or. We really need to have both aspects in mind at all times. So, of course, constraint is a negative word, but nonetheless, as I said, I think many people in this room will know what I'm hinting at when I say unsolved constraints. We have the technical ones, of course, but we also have the legal ones. And we can, I think it's probably, you will agree, to the position that we can do so much more technically and scientifically than we can do legally. So it becomes very interesting to optimize and to positively also approach the legal boundaries in a sustainable manner in order to have as much research being performed as possible within of course, the legal boundaries. And I want to lose a word on that occasion on the reasonable expectations, which is a basic value in ethics and in privacy law. But once a patient makes the decision to spend his or her data
and or biological material, there's of course also a reasonable expectation that research is actually performed. That something good comes out of the disease that I have been exposed to. So we have reasonable expectations in both areas, and it's about managing, creating a framework where they are managed in an optimum and facilitated in an optimum way. So these are not all the controller duties that we have in the GPDR, but those are core demands that a controller under the GPDR has to comply with, and that that has to come out of the model that we're building. These basic elements have to be facilitated in the data sharing framework in order for it to function in an optimum way. So seeing that we have potentially over 30 controllers within IDERHA, because we have more than 30 parties, that is of course an ambitious task, because it has to be said the consortium itself has no legal personality. It cannot carry any risk. It is risk-wise the sum of its partners, and obligation-wise the sum of its partners. So we're searching for a model that can accommodate all these duties in an optimum way in order to create trust and transparency. So this is the model that we've come up with within IDERHA. This is the IDERHA enhanced approach, you could say, for creating a data sharing framework. What is new, or what is coming from legal, I'm looking to my colleague Maria from J&J, having co-developed this with me. This box here is implemented into the existing contractual framework that we have in IDERHA already, because we have the grant agreement up here and the consortium agreement, and they already comprise compliance legislation and contractual obligations. So we're really trying to not reinvent the wheel, but to create something that fits perfectly with everything existing, and only add elements that are not already there, but legally necessary. And in essence, it's the lila box that you see over here, the joint controller agreement, because the GPDR stipulates that to the extent that 2 or more controllers are co-determining the purposes and means of a data processing, they have to conclude a joint controller agreement. And there we have arrived at the step where many projects were before. Okay, a data sharing agreement is needed. Normally it would be well over 200 pages, very long, very difficult to negotiate. The model that we are pursuing in IDERHA takes a different approach. We place the central emphasis on our duty to document under Article 5, Section 2 in the GPDR. That's one of the most essential duties that we have. We have to document that we do and how we are compliant with the basic principles of the GPDR. And in that need, we're looking to the document data management plan that has actually always been in these projects, but not utilized as a framework for documenting who is doing what and why. And that is what is different in this approach. We are placing the emphasis on the DMP, making it a common point of reference, and we intend to have a full and complete and coherent documentation of the factual basis here in the midst, and all assessments, and these 2 black boxes or gray boxes down here are added exactly for to show that we can also accommodate further assessment purposes like AI Act or other acts. Any need we might have to the GPDR assessment, ethics assessment, and the FAIR principle assessment can be accommodated in the model. And over at the GCA side, we have a set of operations basically stipulating what will apply if you bring as access or data into IDERHA, what will apply if you use data within IDERHA, what applies to all joint controllers taking part in the determination of purposes and means. So it's inherently multilateral, the JCA. There's no room for unilateralism at all, because there are no special provisions depicting individual parties and their contributions. It's the same conditions to all, and it's closely aligned with these duties that we have here. So by placing the central emphasis on accountability, we opt for real compliance, because compliance is not a formal issue. We are as compliant as the sum of the actions within IDERHA. It's not a theoretical issue. And by doing so, we create trust, because we put the data subject in an optimum position to exercise their rights. This data management plan is going to be publicly available, and it's going to be the record of data processing taking place within IDERHA. So we take full account of the fact that compliance is a practical issue and not a formal issue that you can handle by concluding a very long and expensive contract that nobody can read and nobody really cares to comply with. We're really opting for true compliance, and it's seeing that it's an interdisciplinary task to create this factual basis. We have also set the scene for real commitment from all implied partners and actors. They can influence this factual basis, and it's being scrutinized from an ethical point of view and other points of views. And so I can influence my own situation as an actor within IDERHA, and of course, the code of conduct and the contractual obligations are then also binding to me and committing to me in a different way. The last thing I want to point out is that this model also allows for dynamic developments. A project can, of course, change, and indeed it should if it has a lifetime of 4 years. It's a bit unreasonable if the lawyers come and say, well, by month 8, we have to have a finished plan of what you intend to do, because otherwise we cannot draft it. That's, of course, not what reality is like, and no real compliance can stem from that, because people are just not able to commit to that. Instead, we have a dynamic body here in the middle that can change, and we have a procedure for that. So we believe that we've set the scene effectively for real compliance within IDERHA, not despite the fact that we have an extreme complexity of data flows and architecture. So to phrase it in a nutshell, today we offer our stakeholders a benchmark of trust and transparency and full compliance with existing privacy standards. And the model is resilient to all concerns, also especially the concern of the purpose binding obligation. We are, of course, purpose bound, and it's going to be documented in the DMP, which is legally binding, I should add. It's an annex to the consortium agreement. Within the future, we can offer an operational setup that will also have validity under the EHDS, because also EHDS is a trust, based on a trust issue and a trust logic, and trust can only stem from transparency, and transparency means we cannot have a black box that nobody understands what is doing. It needs to be clear who is doing what and why. So I'll close my contribution.
Thank you very much, Anne. Really impressive. I think hopefully we've given you a good overview from where we believe is a good way to take IDERHA from a RIA perspective, like how the network could work. I would suggest that we start with the online questions first of all, since we started with your question in the auditorium first, and then take a couple of online questions, but definitely will not forget about you. And before we then, after the questions, go into the RHA part about the regulatory acceptance, which will be a different kind of format. It will be an interactive panel. So, and I'm looking very much forward to that one as well. But Rebecca, you said you had a couple of questions.
Yeah, hi. Okay, so before the break, we had a nice question about data storage. So this might be for Summit as well. Do you use health informatics reference models for data storage? Specifically, have you implemented or thought about open EHR?
So in IDERHA, we are not tackling actually or improving the healthcare IT systems themselves, right? So we are actually using the data that is generated or located in the healthcare IT systems and bringing it to research. And for research purposes, we actually apply data standards like OMAP. I think, Christian, you mentioned that we will use OMAP for structured EHR data and DICOM standard for the imaging data. But OpenEHR is actually, if I'm not wrong, it's to improve the healthcare IT system in the internal landscape of hospitals, right? So that standard is not used. So,
okay, so we're taking the output that is made available from hospitals, and others like Deepak and his team will be driving the improvement in the data in hospitals. Good. That was from the last questions, last session. Thank you that you took that up again. Any questions came in from? Okay.
Here we go. I'm curious if there is a tracking mechanism for who accesses when which data is planned for EHDS. For example, in the US, there's the concept of breaking the glass when a patient's health record is accessed within the hospital. Now that we are talking about large data sets, I'm wondering about IDERHA's approach to monitoring access.
Yes, that's something you could reflect upon.
So maybe regarding the EHDS, so yeah, so regarding the EHDS, it is planned that the patient or the citizen gets informed whenever the data is used and for what purpose it is used. So this is the idea. And
so basically, we will see what the EHDS will bring and not apply an IDERHA rule or something like that.
Can I maybe quickly jump in? As I understand the question, it relates to the technical and organizational measures, and they have to be adequate under the GDPR also as of today. And we're going to, this system that I just described is also accommodating, of course, the need to ensure that we have appropriate TUMs. So it's not possible, I think, right now to answer, or maybe somebody in the room can, but I personally can't. But I can tell you that adequate TUMs are, of course, by default settings also facilitated in the data sharing framework.
TUMs?
Technical and organizational measures.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I respond to that shortly? So in IDERHA, we have technical measures in place to track data accesses, so we can see, or we will be able to see, or at least the data holders, for what purposes the data were accessed and processed in the system. Then was that a correct response to the question?
Wonderful. Then the question is yes. Answer is yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, just one more for the online. Where will this IDERHA DMP be available?
As I understand it, it's going to be available in the on the public website.
Sorry?
It'll be available via the EU port, but also via Zenodo as well.
Okay, good. And we go you first.
Yeah, so I have a question about the DMP. So as I understand the DMP, it's a data management plan, which is very well for generating the data where it's archived and stuff like that. But if you apply for data, since you are talking about data sparseness, it's always that you get a different set of data based on your project. And that I don't see that that's resolved in the data management plan, because that's then the project description of the data and the contract behind that. So can you
Yes, I can expand a little bit about how it's intended. We document the access conditions in the DMP by means of reference. We document what data is entering IDERHA and on what terms, if it's consent-based information or if it's real-world data, and we're documenting also what partner is providing it, and all other necessary information in order to ensure compliance with mainly these three aspects: GDPR and fair and ethics. So that's going to be documented in the DMP, but of course it's not possible to full-scale document the coming into being of the data, but we will document to an extent where it's possible to evaluate the data source. And in the JCA, in the contractual side, we have the obligations placed on each data provider in shaped as guarantees. If Fraunhofer enters data into IDERHA, we are responsible for ensuring that we are only entering data or providing access to data that is legally sound. So the legal guarantees are found in the JCA, but the JCA is basically a set of operational procedures saying to the extent that a party provides data, the following applies. So that's how it's facilitated.
I have a follow-up. So that means you would like to put in the data management plan how you can access and use the data. So we are working on a machine readable. We want to put that on the metadata, which is published with the data description. So that would be something that we also would love to work together on the European level, that we are starting with the data use ontology, but we want to develop that further.
So definitely a follow-up, and that's great, and that's exactly why we're here this morning. More questions? Yeah, there was one here.
Thank you very much. The presentation was absolutely fantastic. I'm talking about the last one. The other two have equally. But my interest is linked to yours. You are talking about Appendix 13, which has become a legally binding document. I assume that all member states, representatives of all member states have consented to this.
Oh, I'm sorry. I know to be more specific, it's the internal IDERHA sphere. I'll show it again. This is the DMP, the data management plan, being legally obliging under the consortium agreement. The consortium agreement is the fundamental, up here you have the fundamental legislation within IDERHA. It's committing to all 32 partners. And the partners have also committed themselves to complying with the DMP. So it's legally binding. It's already a contract. I think your question is hinting.
Yeah, but I was particularly asking because the document requests trust, talks about trust, compliance, full transparency, etc. When it comes to things like that, the member states or the citizens of the member states, they have to consent to start with. And unless they had their own input into this platform, into this document, which in my opinion is of fantastic importance, they cannot. I mean, you trust something of which you contributed, to which you have also contributed and presented the realities of your own countries. Because I have to admit that the realities in Romania are absolutely different, totally different than the realities in the northern countries, for example. So asking for trust and confidence, it's very good, but provided that the representatives of some states have also had some inputs.
You're right. Of course, we can, we are all part of a bigger picture, of course, and we can create trust and transparency within IDERHA. Okay. But seeing that of course, we're utilizing secondary data, so it's not possible to expand these commitments outside of IDERHA. But so it's a risk basically that can be carried because we are compliant organizations, but it has to be carried. So it has to be clear. In your maybe Fraunhofer would import this data set that we are fictively discussing, then Fraunhofer would be responsible for having checked the validity and the legitimacy of importing or accessing that data. That risk has to be asserted and allocated in a binary way. It has to be black and white. This is where the responsibility lies, because then the risk can be carried. But I agree to you, there's so much to be done in the overall perspective, and we have to join forces, I think, to work to that end.
So much to be done, provided you involve all the representatives. Otherwise, the final document, will reflect only certain aspects of Europe, whereas Europe is more holistic. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this important question. I think that's very much where Götzke also went from involving everyone. It's about including the patients and really taking the patient's aspect into consideration. But only if, and we are here mainly for the patients, or because they will be the main benefactors. Only if the patients agree, look, my data can be used, then someone else can use that data set to then use that for AI algorithms. So all these things build onto each other, and that's exactly why we had Götzke. Yeah, and that's why we had that presentation, and where then patients also need to understand there's a risk benefit. Why should I make my data available? I'm potentially one of the most conservative data providers of health data because I want to be sure that nothing is going wrong. But thank you for that important question.
Just a quick question. So, first of all, all of the kind of information and the feedback that went into the developing this there's a very sort of rich group called the Data Access Task Force, which has been sort of helping our legal colleagues do this. But I think from the putting on the hat of somebody who'd like to work with us in the future, who is a data holder, how could they sort of fit into this model as an external organization who's not part of IDERHA but would like to work with us in the future? And that, obviously that's linked to our overall sustainability after the project.
Yes, thank you for that question. I think sustainability, the key sustainability factor that we have here is the new conception of the data management plan. I mean, of course, the documentation doesn't have to be in the data management plan. It could be anywhere, but we're utilizing something that's already there and that is born into so many other projects. So, and that can be extrapolated also on external data holders. If we all can agree to go for real compliance, for practical compliance, and this is a very sustainable and also expandable approach away from formalism and towards real accountability, because then we also have a much better chance of communicating trust, real trust, committing trust to the patients. And the model, as it's shown right here, I can say that because Fraunhofer is involved in so many data projects of all sizes. It's applicable to all multi-party data-driven research projects. It's a logic that stems from the GDPR that's always the same.
Thank you for your leadership here. And I think the statement that Fraunhofer will look into this as well, not only with an IDERHA, but in general, is a really strong statement. And it's fantastic to have your support here. This is an amazing discussion, which definitely grants for a lot more time. We will have lunch together later on. I think we should definitely leverage there. So let this think in, because now we have 2-minute bio break while we prepare here for the stage that we then can go into the next part of the session. So be back as quickly as possible. And thank you very much for all your questions.
Bisschen besser anfangen. Also verlocken vorhin. Okay. Yeah, yeah. I was going to say, you guys have 3 of these. Yes, we have 3. Like to put some? Yeah. I needed to have it.
You want to mic yourself as well? Oh, you have. Oh, sorry. Glass is not always help.
I think we've lost our audio.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Embarrassing. I think it looks nice.
Okay, excellent. Last but definitely not least, I'm really looking forward now to the panel discussion about pushing the policy envelope to meet our health needs, and hand over to the panel and looking forward to a very interactive discussion. And please continue with questions. Questions are why we are here for. Thank you.
So I know we stand between lunch and this discussion, but I think this is going to be a very fulfilling discussion that will get you prepped for lunch. One of the things that we talked about when we were putting the different sessions together is that we wanted to keep circling back to the why are we doing this in the first place? Just because data is available, should we have access to it? How are we going to use that data to be meaningful for all of the different stakeholders that we work with throughout the environment? And I loved your slide, Gazda, and I'm going to steal it with the 4 panes of like, what does it mean for each of the different stakeholder groups that we're working with? I loved also Thurston's explanation of like the rapid expansion and change and innovation and the therapies and the therapeutic options that are being offered to our patients. But one of the key factors in that is how do we get those to our patients? We have this, this overwhelming glut of data that's come into our system. How do we use that responsibly to build not just data, but to build real meaningful evidence? And one of the big things that we're really focusing on in this session is how do we transform real-world data into real-world evidence that is meaningful for all of our different stakeholders and that supports getting those new therapeutic options to our patients. So we've talked a little bit about the data access issues. And so we're going to pivot more around how do we use real-world evidence. Lots of the benefits have been expounded upon about what real-world evidence can do for us. It can get hard to serve populations or hard to study populations in areas like rare diseases and pediatrics. It can address some of the shortfalls of traditional clinical trials and enabling the evidence generation for more diverse patient populations, and hopefully also looking at some of the health inequities that you spoke to so eloquently earlier. We hope that we can use this real-world evidence to improve the delivery of care and accelerate the development of new therapies. But in order to do that, with all of this, we need to start building the policy frameworks and enabling the harmonization of policies across different healthcare systems. One of the key things we're seeing is that there are some early uptake in policy, in the acceptance of real-world evidence, both for regulatory and HTA decision-making. But there are also some lags in the system. And one of the goals of what we're trying to do in part of the IDERHA project is identify those opportunities to accelerate policymaking. So one of the key things that we're talking about now is how do we build the mechanisms of trust that should exist in the system around real-world evidence, and how do we address those to the individual stakeholder needs so that they can, again, trust the evidence that's being put forward to them. So I have asked a great group of this multi-stakeholder group to come speak with us today. I have Christian Ehrentruk, who is the executive coordinator for, I'm going to introduce everybody first, who's the executive coordinator for the Romanian Foundation of Diabetes Associations. Although he was trained as an engineer, he's had a long history of working in a variety of positions that really support patients. As a program manager and country coordinator for several development programs, working on the board of the United Way of Romania. He's also been involved in a variety of other similar projects that are EU funded. He's worked on the Prefer, Compare EU, and H2O. Then we have Paul Janssen, who is the program director of data and real-world evidence for the National Institute for Health and Health Excellence in the UK. And I'm going to say it, he's also a really nice guy. Had to, sorry. And his role is strategically to ensure that NICE is on the forefront of harnessing new and emerging opportunities with real-world evidence to inform NICE's policies. He has a PhD in informatics, and in his prior role, he also did a lot of work on the portfolio for international research projects focused on harnessing real-world data and real-world evidence. We have Stina Monkson.
Yeah.
I knew I was going to get it wrong. Who is currently serving as the scientific senior advisor to the Data Analytics Center for the Danish Medicines Agency. She also has a whole nother job where she is union chairman for the Professionals in Life Science for Denmark. She works on a multidisciplinary team on data-driven approaches in regulatory setting. And she has an extensive background in history, building on her training as a pharmacist and a PhD in clinical cancer research and drug development of a lot of the real-world data sources that we're looking to leverage, registries, drug prescription, and patient disease registries. And then joining us online, so we'll be talking to the sky a little bit today, is Joanna Korensok-Wymko. And she is the professor of medicine and the head of the Department of Genetics and Clinical Immunology. She is the current vice president of the European Respiratory Society and has been a principal investigator and coordinator for many clinical studies and programs. So with these esteemed colleagues from different stakeholder groups, we have patients, we have clinicians, we have regulators, and we have an HTA. We're going to try to talk through some of the difficult challenges of how do we develop and build those mechanisms of trust so that we can start looking at real-world evidence for key clinical decision making. But before I do that, I'm going to do a little round robin with each of you about why are you here in the first place? What got you started in looking at real world evidence? I'm going to start with you, Paul.
Oh, thank you, Helen. Very nice to be here. You're very nice too. So a little bit of context, I think, before we go into, excuse me, the conversation. So NICE is 25 years old today. We've been around for a long time, but the healthcare system around us is really under a lot of pressure, and we're seeing that ourselves. So we're changing the way we're working. We're on a journey of transformation. So what we want to do is provide more focused, more useful guidance, more up to date, and also be driven by data and insight from the healthcare system, because there's an enormous amount of data available, and we want to make use of that. So our transformation journey is really focused on these opportunities around data. We also have a 5-year strategy which sets out that we want to make better use of the broad data that's generated in the system. I think that really underpins the journey that we're on. There are quite a few different HTA organizations in Europe. They're all at different stages in terms of how they deal with data and the trust they have in the data. Again, trust will pop up again and again and again. It's about building trust. So that perhaps explains where we're at the moment. So we have a vision around use of data. So we want to focus on 5 different key areas over the next few years. So firstly, it's about data access. We're hugely excited about the opportunities that we heard about today. The federated data networks, secure data environments in the UK. NICE is not a typical data user as such. We get submissions to us, so it's the developers, the manufacturers who submit the dossier to us, but we want to get more data into the organization. So that's number 1. Number 2, we want to understand how we can increase the data in our products. So we're monitoring not just, I should explain, we're not just an HTA organization, but we're a guideline organization as well. So we produce clinical guidelines as well. We want to increase those data sources in these products, and we're monitoring the use cases and where we see opportunities for greater use in these products across the range of products that we do. What we want to also do is upskill and create capacity within the organization. NICE, we're not used to dealing with the data, and we're not particularly used to understanding the strengths and weaknesses of non-randomized data. So we want to enhance that, and we're on that journey. And then once we get that, we want to engage with you guys and with industry, with academia, with the regulators around how we continue on this journey. And we're seeing AI being thrown into the equation as well. We don't know how we deal with AI technologies, for instance. There's an awful lot for us to do in this space. So yeah, hugely great to be here today.
That's wonderful. And Stina from...
Yeah, it's a little bit like Paul, but I think our initiative to be involved in these kind of projects and use the data is that historically, as you said, clinical trial data has actually been the only data source for approving new medical products, but the landscape is changing and we're using more and more data. Both we have also in the regulatory system used data, sort of, and real world data has been used in the phase 4 trials, where it has been out on patients, but now it's changing. So data is coming in side by side by the clinical trials, and also AI is coming in. And as you said, trust is very important, and we as a regulator both need to be able to have the trust of the patient that we can use data correctly, and also that the medical products that we put on market or accepting on market is also trustworthy, that we're still accepting have the high value of being correct and safe and effective. So for us, there are kind of 2. There are both the pre-market authorization phase and also after the pharmacovigilance. So we both we want to use data our own. I'm in the data analytics center. It has taken us 5 years to get access to data as a regulator. And use the data still as research and innovation, and and statistics, and not as a government task. So we need to do it in a research setting, because that is how the data has been collected. But it has taken me 5 years to try and to get access to these data to use. So I think we need to be involved with both the researchers and industry to find the best way that we can use this data, and we can end up where still be a regulatory system who can be trusted.
I think one of the things that often HTAs and regulators are seen as the gatekeepers. You are the people who we go to when we want to know what's safe and effective and cost effective. But I think let's go to the end users. Let's go to Christian.
Okay. In terms, is it on? Okay. In terms of data usage, the techies with the computer said that if you put garbage in your machine, you'll get garbage out. So it took some time for the pharma industry, for the researchers to realize that if they don't get the proper data, they will not get the proper results. Having RCTs, from my point of view, it's looking at a very well-controlled environment where you test and try to deal with a disease. In real life, you are not a disease, you're a person, you're an individual. You go to work, you learn, you have children, you build up a family. You need to respond to a number of questionnaires that are looking into your very private life. You need to dedicate your time not only to your treatment and your family and your social life, but also to supporting the system, because you want to share what your experience is with the scientists so they can develop something better for you and for you, if not for you, for your children eventually. So it is a complicated matter to move from RCTs to using real-life evidence. And I think that if we can bring together the perspective of researchers, legislators, regulators, and users, and final payers, actually, oops, sorry. We might find a way to better integrate real data into research with a reflection to the patients, finally.
And I think one of the key things that we talked about in our previous calls was that importance of that conversation with your clinicians and the evidence that your clinicians are sharing with you and how they're sharing it with you. And so while Joanna couldn't be here in person, I believe that she was able to call in. So I would love to hear from you, Joanna, kind of from a clinical point of view. What are the key things that you need in order to enable trust and also to provide real meaningful evidence to your patients as part of that shared clinical decision making?
Well, good morning or almost good afternoon. I'm really sorry for not being able to join in person. However, yes, I would very much welcome opportunity to share my point of view as a clinician, although I fully agree with with the previous speakers. The randomized clinical trials, as of course you know, are currently considered a gold standard to evaluate, for example, efficacy of given intervention, to build the evidence to support the regulatory approval for treatments, for drugs. And therefore, they are designed in a very specific way. So with very stringent control on the recruitment, with a very precise protocol, with a very well-defined, however limited, inclusion and exclusion criteria. Therefore, the provided information is considered very reliable. However, it comes with the price, and the price is the lack of generalizability. So for what it means for clinician, I will be happy to give an example of bronchial asthma. It means that it is estimated only 7% of the patient population actually fits the criteria of the clinical trial. In other words, 93% of patients would never ever be included. However, we built our guidelines, we built our strategy on treatment on the data coming from those 7%. So, and this is one of the many reasons why we also need a data coming from real life evidence from the 100 of population, because of course we want to be able to serve all the patients in the most optimal way. And then there comes a problem with a number of other populations we care for, like you mentioned, rare diseases, or for example, oncology. This is fast developing field where we tend to look nowadays at different subtypes of cancer. Again, lung cancer is a great example, as actually quite a distinct clinical entities, and therefore treatment and management is quite different. So that builds up a smaller population that are actually very difficult to look at, or I would rather even say to being considered from the point of view of highly regulated clinical trials. And as I mentioned, the real life evidence comes here as a very important source of data. I do believe that from a point of view as a clinician, the real life evidence is as important as data from clinical trials, although of course it comes with a certain price. We need to be aware of, we need to take into account. So from the clinical point of view, the understanding of value of real life evidence has to be also, we need to understand it better. We need to understand the strengths and weaknesses in order not to make mistakes, and be able to actually bring all those sources together to build a more reliable data sources for decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. And I appreciate you being able to call in. I really, your perspective is really important in this conversation. And I think one of the things I wanted to also take a step back is when we started this work, we got lots of questions from people about the different kinds of evidence and the different types of questions that people might have. And so one of the key questions we get are the differences between what is the regulatory types of questions that need to be addressed and those that would be addressed by an HTA. So I thought we would talk about that because that feeds into some broader questions about how we would frame real world evidence generation later. So I'm going to start with you, Stina, to talk about kind of what is a regulator, the kinds of questions that you're looking to address.
For us, it's important that the data quality is in place. It needs to be high quality, and we need to be able to trust the results of the data analysis. So, but it's also transparency. When we talk about AI as both as a medical device, if you have like an algorithm and you have made your analysis with this algorithm, you need to be able to maybe not directly reproduce it, but you need at least be able to explain what has happened. And right now they're talking about these black boxes. You put data in, something happens, and you get an output. And that can be really hard as a regulator to both assess and control. So for us, it's transparency is really important, and the data quality is also really important.
And the primary questions you're looking at are safety, effectiveness, and performance, right? Yeah. So those are kind of the key factors.
Primarily safety and efficacy, effectiveness. Yeah, it's the
And building on the same idea that you're going to want high quality, trustworthy data, Paul, like what are the kinds of questions that you as both as an HTA and a standard setting organization, what are you the kinds of questions you're looking to address?
Yeah, so the process is a bit stepwise. So we've got the regulation, marketing authorization for the treatment. Then it goes to the HTA body, which is looking at the clinical effectiveness and cost effectiveness compared with the current practice, standard practice. And then it goes to the payers who then decide if we want to pay for it, sort of thing. How do we get the money for it? And all these different bodies have different questions to look at. As you said, efficacy and safety for regulation. For us, it's more about understanding the comparative effectiveness, as I said, compared with what we're doing at the moment. Does the treatment provide value for money effectively? So we're asking slightly different questions beyond the efficacy. So we're talking about effectiveness in the treatment population that we're commissioning treatment for. We also want to know longer term outcomes. When we're looking at clinical and cost effectiveness of treatments, we're looking at the overall clinical benefit that the patient receives potentially over a lifetime, and you're not going to get that lifetime information from a clinical trial that runs a year or 2 or 3 or 4 years. It's just not impossible. So we need that additional real life information to support those sort of modeling aspects to understand the clinical benefit. And also to understand the patient populations better. As I said, the entry criteria into trials is quite strict, often doesn't quite reflect the clinical population that we're treating in practice. So we want evidence on those patient populations who are more diverse. Real-world evidence can help with that, but again, we need to create the trust. So to do that, we need to signal. In effect, we've had decades of understanding how to run good clinical trials. We haven't had the same experience in generating and analyzing non-randomized data, which are prone to biases and confounding. So we need to tell our committees, how can we trust this data? And the journey we are on is to try and sort of provide signals, what we think good looks like. We've provided a framework, real-world evidence framework, that sets out what we think is good practice around the study design, data collection, evidence synthesis, and so on. And it focuses on transparency. You describe why you've included, which patient populations you've included, what the patients look like, what have you done in terms of analysis, transparency, and describing what you're doing with the data, so we can then critique it and understand the strengths and weaknesses of the data to answer the specific questions that you want to answer. And just to emphasize, we're not getting away from clinical trials entirely. RCTs will always have a role, but we need to have that additional information that's generated in practice alongside, particularly for new treatments where the evidence base is weaker. And I think there's a massive opportunity beyond drugs. So, for instance, Stina, you're talking about algorithms. So we're starting to look at digital therapies, for instance. These could be apps on your phone, or it could be diagnostic algorithms. Previously, we hardly ever assessed those technologies, but looking at the stats, I think we've gone from 1 or 2 technologies per year to last year, we appraised 70 digital health technologies, and all of those are underpinned by evidence from real-world data.
I think that intersection between these emerging technologies, AI, a lot of the imaging technologies, a lot of the diagnostic technologies that exist out there, and real-world data and real-world evidence is going to only become more interconnected.
Absolutely. And if you're looking at medtech, for instance, medtech isn't underpinned by RCTs to the same extent as drugs are. There's various reasons for that. So the companies developing those technologies are smaller, they haven't necessarily got the capability to run trials, and it's not necessarily feasible. We've got hundreds of different technologies. You can't run hundreds of trials, for instance. So you are bound to be relying on other types of data alongside. But again, we need to trust the data. So we need to generate that trust, signal what we think good looks like.
I think, and also those conversations between clinicians and patients. I keep going back to kind of the most important conversations that any of us have in our life is that shared clinical decision making between doctors and patients. And how do we communicate? I think you brought up the issue, Joanna, about the need to be able to explain the evidence. RCTs combined with real world evidence. And I'd love to toss the question to you and Christian, like what are the kinds of considerations that you have and the questions that are currently going unanswered that you hope real world evidence can support? And for you, Christian, and then Joanna, what questions do you have, sir?
Well, after more than 45 years of dealing with a chronic condition, I would say that I had the fortune to be with very good medical partners, let's say, whatever they were, medical assistants, medical doctors, specialists. But again, they were kind of a not so many. It is important to be able to communicate with your counterpart, to be able to speak its language. I might be illiterate. I might just barely read what writes on the ad there. Or what shop is that? Unless I look into it and say, oh, it's bread. That's good for me. So I need to be able, as a medical professional, to communicate with somebody who barely reads or writes or does figures. There are some conditions where your evolution depends on figures. You measure this or that, and this is good, this is bad. You go to the good doctor, and the good doctor tells you, oh, you need to keep this under that level or above that level. What the heck? I can barely add 2 and 2. So the stories that you need to bring that message in a way that whoever is on the other side of the table understands your, and the importance of keeping that element down or up. So communicating with your healthcare professional is essential. And one of the categories that in a number of countries are overlooked, it's the medical assistants. They are closer to the patient. They speak their language. They know who their relatives are. They know where they are coming from. It's not only the 10, 15, half an hour the good doctor spends with you. It's more than that. And they might be a good conveyor of good messages, good practices from the scientists, the doctors, the researchers to the ultimate user and payer.
So, and Joanna, for you, like hearing that, I can see you shaking and nodding your head in the background here. Would you love to respond to that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, for me, absolutely the most important factor in successful management is really discuss the disease and potential treatments with the patients. However, it sounds, I really do believe that this is a basics of my approach to any patient. Then again, for good management, I need a solid data. So you asked about the questions that we as a clinicians have been discussing, and I think the major question that comes back again and again is whether the data coming from randomized clinical trials or trials are really applicable to the general patient population. I brought in the example of bronchial asthma, but there are many other examples. So this is actually the ongoing question, whether this particular clinical situation reflects, or I should rather reverse it, whether the clinical trial that I refer to in my understanding that might be an optimal treatment for this specific patient, is it really, can I generalize those data? Are those data applicable to this, to the person that sits in the front of me? And that also brings many other questions, like whether designing the clinical trials for success, because this is the way we design clinical trials, provide us a complete data. Of course, it doesn't. So we, for that, I strongly believe we need real life data. Also, the clinical trials are not so good in bringing in the PROs, so patient-reported outcomes, which I believe are very, very important. Again, real-life evidence is much more informative here. Then we need also data regarding the longer time spans, or generally speaking, natural history of the disease. Real life, I mean, randomized clinical trial would never provide information about that, because they are designed for a limited follow-up time. And I think there are many other examples. I have already mentioned rare diseases. For that, clinical trials are very difficult to run due to number of problems, like size of the group, time span of the clinical trials, number of ethical issues regarding the treatment and placebo. So the questions are more, in my opinion, into the fact how to do the real life studies to get a reliable, solid information, rather than whether we really need the real life evidence. I think many, if not all, are absolutely understand that we need the real life evidence to have a broader insight into the efficacy of the interventions. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. And as I think as we move forward with this project, one of the key things that we're hoping to do is address like all of these issues that keep resonating around. How do we develop this robust, reliable evidence that supplements, complements, and provides a more meaningful picture for our patients, the end users at the end of the day? I think, Christian, you called us the final payer. But so as we talk through these issues, I wanted to also open it up for questions. I don't know if people in the room have questions or if there are any online.
I'm very pragmatic and also result-based oriented person. Therefore, I'm going to ask you, sir, the representative of HTA, one question. Do you think that such a consolidated system, including the information on our health status, will eventually entail to the change of the present statu quo in the price and reimbursement, which HTA is applying? Because HTA will soon realize, after reviewing the system, that the unmet needs of the patients are absolutely the same, irrespective whether she lives in Bulgaria, Romania, or Ireland.
Mm.
So, and yet, in order to heal my own problems, a Bulgarian, Romanian will have to do different things than the one in the northern countries.
Yeah.
So is it going to be any change? Are we anticipating? Because if that's the truth, then we are all embracing with super high confidence the system. Thank you very much.
This is not a small question, and I think Stina can help me with this. So, but I think it's really useful to try and separate out. So there's questions around affordability. There's questions around willingness to pay that may vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and then the payment models and looking at the benefit that you receive versus the money you pay. That varies from countries. In terms of, if you separate that out from the evidence, I think once we have evidence that reflects the patient population that you're treating, you are likely to get better evidence. So in effect, you should be able, or companies should be able to demonstrate the clinical benefit in greater detail with more certainty, which has to be a good thing. How that happens, whether it's one system, multiple systems, federated systems, whatever it is, there's not going to be one solution to all this, and different disease areas have different needs and requirements, particularly in rare diseases, for instance. There's a huge use case for registry data, for instance, in those cases, because you can't just run trials. So I don't think there's one system, there's not one solution, but if we start to build a more common understanding of what good looks like, as I said before, that starts to help the conversation around, can we use this evidence to make the local decisions for the local populations? It probably doesn't answer your question, but.
And I am being very frank, at my age, you cannot tell anything but the truth.
Perfect, yeah.
And there are many questions related to this policy. You can avail yourself of the fact that there are no facts and so on and so forth. Soon you will be provided with real facts. Do you realize that after that, the number of questions will increase?
Yeah.
They will say, why is that so?
Well, we have to be pragmatic. We can't just continue to ask for more and more and more data. There will always be some decision uncertainty around any decision you make in healthcare. So we just have to accept that. So we have to find a level of pragmatism that fits, I guess, the decision that you are making. There's no clear answer to that either. And that, again, varies from one health system to another in terms of how that's treated. All I can say is, let's be evidence-based, let's be pragmatic, and let's try and build trust, as I said, in the quality of the data, so that we can be certain that if we're making decisions based on non-randomized data, that we're making the right decision. We're not making biased or wrong decisions based on poor quality data or misunderstanding what the data is telling us. So we get those basics right first, and then we can start to talk about how can we pay for these treatments. I mean, there's huge problems around gene and cell therapies, for instance, hugely expensive therapies, amazing therapies really that can transform lives. But our societies, we haven't quite discussed how we deal with those payment decisions.
Yeah, and I can just add that now, you're UK, not European Union anymore, unfortunately.
We're the bad kid. We're a bad kid.
But the European Union is working on a more centralized procedure for the HTA assessment. So coming forward, there will be like a more centralized procedure going on how to assess these HTA. Yeah, but that's in process. That's in process right now. So it will follow more the way that we are assessing the market authorization process, where it will go out to the different countries, but the decision will lie in a centralized body. And I can say you are talking about the northern European countries. Just between Denmark and Sweden, there are differences in pricing in the same products. And in Denmark, we are like, this is a Danish company. Why are the products cheaper in Sweden? And so just between in the similar country, there are also right now a huge price difference in prices. So we are working on how to, but it's also the policy. How are the price setting from and what does the government support and what does they not? So it's as Paul says, a very big question.
Just as a quick note, one of the things that we are trying to do under this work package is make recommendations to policymakers. We can't make policy, but we can help to inform policy. And so our goal is to really develop recommendations about the acceptability, the criteria for determining the acceptability of real-world evidence. Now, what they do with that is totally up to them, but we can try to help it inform.
Yeah, and also as a regulator, I'm a member of the methodology working party at EMA, where we have like a small real-world evidence group where we are working on the policies and the guidelines and the recommendation on how companies should use data in regards to make it more sufficient to be used in the regulatory approval.
It's becoming a little bit easier because we've got organizations, as you said, like the EMA, the FDA in the US, various agencies in Europe coming up with their guidance. What we want to see is some relative alignment. We appreciate that we can't have fully agreed guidance on everything under the sun that all nations will adhere to and agree to, but we need some sort of pragmatic alignment between the US, between Europe in particular, because drug development business is a global business. You don't develop evidence just for one country. So we need to try and get that alignment. We're having conversations with our colleagues in Canada, in the US, and Europe, of course, around that. We need to get that alignment, really crucial. And one thing, use cases, successful use cases where evidence has been used and proved to be robust and reliable are hugely useful. So if we start to collect those use cases, you can then have those conversations with agencies like, we've done this, we could take those decisions. Why can't you do the same? Have those conversations, but once you have something concrete in terms of use cases, examples of what good looks like, you can take that to people and have those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see Joanna has her hand up.
Yes, well, I can absolutely agree that what we need, and this is an urgent need, is a guidance from the agencies, because there are real life data and there are real life data. So it is important that the general public, if I might say so, understands the requirements and also has the guidance from you, what is expected in terms of the quality of the data. And I think registries are actually a great example of real-life evidence, much more richer than randomized clinical trials in certain areas, like for example, long-term follow-up of the patients, long-term follow-up of the efficacy of the treatment, of the management, of specific approaches. However, as you of course know, there's a number of confounders and there is a bias which has to be taken into account. So I think having that in mind, it's really important that the research community understands your expectation and also in a way is well educated in how to collect the real life evidence, because that at the end would provide the highest possible data to be analyzed. I think that would be very important. Thank you.
And that was a great question. Obviously, it poked a few bears, which is what we want to have happen. So do we have any online questions, Rebecca? Okay, we're good. Any other questions from the audience here? Yeah.
Regarding HTA. There are several countries within EU, I think Australia as well, they are using the health technology reassessment just because of these new technologies and using real world data and real world evidence. In some countries, they decided to accept certain level of risk and to put risk sharing agreements in place and to set up in the beginning the schedule for health technology reassessment just to cross this. And these data could help a lot. That's my question is it the way that we move forward, what we expect from 1st or 15th January 2025? I think we expect to have joint HTA clinical assessment that we set up already, that we expect to have this health technology reassessment just to make sure that our countries are not staying behind. Because what we see now, for example, Belgium, just to be very honest, Belgium agency, they published 2 years ago the study regarding oncology treatment. And the result from their assessment and their data was that they paid a lot for not getting what they expected. And the result is that in our countries, health technology assessment agencies, they are saying, okay, based on that, we are not going to pay anything because we see that in Belgium, they told us based on real world data that they paid and they didn't get. Thank you.
I'm not going to touch on the European community aspect of things, but I think there's huge opportunity. So currently we do quite static assessment. So we have an assessment when the medicine comes out through regulation and HTA process. At that time, there's a lot of uncertainty around the effectiveness. So the benefits of monitoring clinical outcomes in practice over time, there's huge opportunities there, but it's quite expensive to do and it's quite difficult to do in practice and you need a lot of data. We're sort of getting there and we're seeing today and we've seen over the last couple of years, this is becoming a reality. I know, for instance, Canada is starting to do more rolling assessment of data fueled by real-world evidence. Yeah. So there are ways to do this, but it is expensive. And you also have to accept that it may be uncomfortable. The outcomes you're getting out of it may be uncomfortable. Perhaps the treatment is performing much better than anticipated, but also on the other hand, it could be not quite as good. So would companies be happy to exposing that information? Probably not. But we as a healthcare provider would like to know that. So the opportunities for using data to inform those decisions are great, and we would like to see more of that. We just haven't quite worked out the mechanisms. But in terms of the European coordination, I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, I think you should look. Right now, there isn't much coordination in regards to the HTA. We have in Denmark, we have a medicine council who approve oncology treatment, and they also look at, say, this is too expensive. We need to, but then the public say, oh, why can't we get it? We can see you can get it in Germany. So there is, I think there needs to be more alignment and where you actually use data from other countries as well. But we had a situation in the European Union where a drug was approved for a treatment for a long, short, what do you say, long time cancer. It wasn't growing fast; it was slow growing cancer. But the side effects of that was you get an aggressive cancer. So the patient died sooner because of this side effect. So should you keep that on the market? No, the doctor, when they found out, didn't want to keep on giving that to the patient. They wanted other treatments, but the company at first didn't actually want to take it off market. But you need to look into what are the benefits, and as Paul said, there can be really good benefits where you actually see you haven't seen this kind of efficacy in the trials, but there are also the other hand where you see it actually doesn't have the effect that you anticipated. So there are also that. Yeah. I think that's coming.
A quick example, when you look at the clinical trial that proved successful in a particular area and you move it into real life, you need to understand as a researcher that it's not only delivering the good medicine or device, it's also what goes around it. And sometimes, and I have an example of Canada and Germany saying under HTA that a certain insulin treatment for type 2 diabetes doesn't work and should be cancelled. Well, they forgot to look at the treatment with insulin and the training necessary to do so, which is more expensive, definitely. And if you look that the training will fade out in 3 months and you will need to do individual training with individuals, but you'll save the individual. That's a long story, and HTA cannot look at it within the box. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's a great example too of that it's not just a single issue. So I think Joanna came up as well. Joanna, I didn't know if you had another comment.
Yes, very shortly. I think it's important to mention that the randomized clinical trials do not take into account a very important factor, which is the way how the healthcare is organized in a specific country and to what extent the delivery of care is efficient. So the randomized clinical trial creates a very ideal world of care delivery for the patient. So we observe this so-called placebo effect in the placebo group because the care is so much better within the trial. But then comes the real life and the way how the system is organized, whether patient, the care, the treatment is accessible for a patient is so very important. And I think to a certain extent the disparity between data coming from clinical trials and the data coming from real life observations as it has been, I think, mentioned a number of times, that might be a source of differences. And the analysis have to take it into consideration, because if at the end the data, for example, data analyzed by the National Health Fund or whoever delivers the care, do not provide such an positive outcome as the clinical trials. For me, as a clinician, the question arises whether the patients were managed as efficiently as with this given clinical trial. So in that extent, I think the real-life evidence provides also a very important insight for the policymakers at the national level. Because in directly, real-life evidence also provides well, assessment of the whether the system is efficient or not. Thank you.
I think that that's a wonderful point. And this has been a great conversation, and maybe ending on kind of the analogy that I often have used and colleagues have used to describe the difference between traditional clinical trials and real world evidence is a traditional clinical trial is the tiger in the zoo that is 24/7 veterinary care, perfectly balanced diet, and an environment that's built around their best selves. And what we're really interested in real world evidence is the tiger in the wild, the one who has to get up early and take their kids to childcare and go to work and get stuck in the carpool lane and runs late to their doctor's appointment and may eat fast food every once in a while because it's there. So I think that that is in general what we're trying to do is reflect the real lives with real people with real world evidence. So on that note, I want to thank you all and my wonderful panelists for this great discussion and knowing that we're going to be pushing this policy work forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Talking. Yeah, it's said so. It's the important part. And I'm standing between you and the food. I believe it's not fast food, but I like the tiger example very much. And if I'm looking at what we're trying to achieve is like the IHI, the Innovative Health Initiative, is really aiming to drive research and innovation for the benefit of patient and society. And what we've been trying to achieve today is take you on a journey how we as an IDERHA team to interpret this and looking both from a technology perspective, but very much so from an implementation perspective. What I very much like, it's about the human factor. The technology can be as great as anything. The human factor will continue to play an amazing role. Also, what I also took from very much from the last part, it's about supplementing, not because there is digital out there, everything needs to be digital. We have used digital in order to bring you in as a dial-in. We don't need to meet face-to-face all the time. It's about finding an optimal combination of it. And I mean, if I listen to Thorsten this morning, who really opened us up on the very important area of lung cancer. I mean, other diseases are by no means less important, but showing what can such platforms actually drive? How can they take it forward? Making the comparison about comparing treatment in Denmark versus Norway versus Romania, having these kind of opportunities, suddenly being able to collect objective data. I think this is very impressive. And the overarching topic for me within this meeting, from which I learned a lot, was trust. Trust was the red line everywhere, being it about trusting the data that you have for doing your evaluation, garbage in, garbage out. Garbage in, garbage out goes very much to the topic about, do we as citizens and patients make our data available? Do we trust, because you cannot do an evaluation if the data is not complete. If we look into algorithms, sorry for that, but for me, an algorithm is a very sophisticated statistical analysis. If you've got garbage in, garbage out data, the algorithm will not come to the results. We might not be able to do the personalized care, as Thorsten said. Within algorithms, we might identify new risk factors. For that, we need complete patient records. And then definitely it's about trust. How is data protected? We have been presenting to you the approach that is very much foreseen by the European Union about federated data. Basically, it's a very extensive cloud approach. How can that drive trust? How can a trustful data space approach technical infrastructure play a role? And then obviously also from a legal framework. So I hope we were able to establish a little bit of trust that we what we're aiming, but really we would like to really get feedback from your side and see how we can adjust, course adjust. We have got a direction we would like to go, but we are also working very much with the sailing analogy. If the wind starts blowing from a different direction or there's a current coming from a different direction, it makes much more sense to go into that direction. That's what we're here for, and looking forward to the discussion, starting at lunch and then continuing it from there. Thanks a lot.
Sorry, if I can have your attention for 1 more minute, please. So, like Christian already mentioned, we do a little bit of data collection ourselves as well. We'll move the little video away from the QR code, but we would really like your input on how we did today. We did it for the first time. We like to improve on this. So next year it will be better based on your feedback. Thanks a lot.